conversations with fellow freelance models. And today I have Anoush Anou on the line. Say hello.
Hey, Christy. Hey, everyone. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do the podcast with me. I'm really excited to get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and likewise. I know we spent a few days together a few years ago, but I don't feel like I really got to talk too much across that time.
Yeah, there was a lot going on. There was, 10 or 15 models there.
There was a lot going on. Oh my gosh. And I had poison oak all over my body from a shoot the week before, and I wasn't able to sleep. So I was not feeling my best self that week.
Oh my God.
Other than that, it was an amazing event.
Wow, that's intense. I've never experienced poison oak or poison ivy, actually.
Oh, it's the worst. Yeah, we don't have it where I'm from, so I came to the States completely oblivious to its existence, and that was my second time dealing with it. The first time kind of made sense. I had no idea that this plant existed, so I was posing with it, and that was the whole thing. And then I was so paranoid about it forever after that, so I was always looking out for it. I knew exactly what it looked like, but I didn't realize that in like the fall and winter, when its leaves have dropped, it's still poisonous. So I think the second time is I was not having my eyes open for like sticks that could be poisonous, basically.
Man, I was actually in the forest a couple days ago, and I think that there was poison ivy around. It looked like poison ivy. And my friend and I, who were shooting together, were like, I've never had like a poison ivy rash, and we've been in the forest a lot. And I heard somewhere that only like 30% of people are like not very affected at all by poison ivy and poison oak. And I feel like maybe I'm one of them. So
I hope you are. Yeah, I'm so envious of those people because it's pretty gross, and I think it affects me worse than most people. I mean, it lasts for the disgusting part. I don't want to like gross out your listeners with it, but the initial part lasts for a few weeks on me, which is I think it's quite a long time. But the scarring lasts for like more than half a year. It's really intense.
yeah, wow.
One of the occupational hazards that we face.
Yeah, I would seriously want to avoid poison oak and poison ivy in that case. Like, that's awful. It leaves scarring and everything. Shit.
Definitely. Yes. So I was not sleeping very well at the time that I met you because it's so itchy throughout the night.
Oh man. I mean, the things that art models have to deal with that people don't even think about, like the threat of getting tetanus, like once a week, probably.
Tetanus, ticks, yep, poisonous plants, I don't know, snakes, depending on where you are. Anyway, sorry to dive directly into the disgusting health.
It's real, though.
It is a real part of the job for sure.
Cool. For our listeners, I would like to hear how you first got into modeling and then how your career has progressed and led you to where you are today.
Yeah, so I initially got into photographic modeling through life modeling for painters and sketch artists, sculptors, which I think is a not uncommon way of getting into this. And that was in Australia about sort of 16 years ago. I had sort of been traveling around the world doing a lot of different laboring jobs for many years leading to that point, and I decided that I wanted to have a go at living somewhere. So I sort of settled on Australia. I'm originally from New Zealand. And I had spent some time in Melbourne, Australia, and it had just struck me as being a really nice city. So when I decided I wanted to have a go at staying still for a while and, maybe getting to know people for more than a week at a time, taking some classes, stuff like that, I thought of Australia. I was sort of in India while I concocted this plan. And I was thinking, well, I'm going to need like, a non-seasonal job, like something that I could do in the city, what wouldn't drive me crazy. And I had done one life modeling session when I was much younger, when I was studying photography, actually, when I was like 17 through 18. I tried it out then, and it was an interesting experience. And I think I had really just done it for the experience. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's so painful. I'm never doing that again. And then, flash forward quite a few years later, when I was thinking about what I might be able to do for a couple of years, it just sort of ticked all the boxes. I thought it's something that I'm going to be around creative people. I'm going to be around people who are enjoying what they're doing. It's something that's flexible. Like I can still call my own hours and travel if I want to. So yeah, I just sort of started life modeling. I did that full time for 3 years. And just through being involved in that creative community in Australia, I was occasionally meeting photographers who were, like painters and photographers both, who might invite me to do a photo shoot or even just to do photography for reference for their paintings. And I sort of just slowly but surely got involved in photographic modeling through that.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So you started out as a life model doing like painting and sketching sessions and then moved into photographic modeling, like kind of transitioned into that.
Yes, exactly. There was I developed like a small photographic portfolio across, I think it was like in 2010. And then towards the end of that year, I was invited to a group event hosted by an American woman in Australia. And there were a lot of the full-time amazing models who you and I both know, like Rebecca Lawrence, Kira Grant, a few of those gorgeous people there. And I sort of was like, oh, that's how I could do this full time, would be to travel. So I booked my first trip a month after that and I haven't looked back. Definitely part of the reason for that was that it was just so painful, like the modeling, like staying still. I mean, this is very physically demanding as well, but I just didn't really want to see what the long poses, staying still for 20, 30 minutes at a time would do to my body long term, because it's pretty unnatural. I think we're always moving. Even when we're asleep, we, have freedom of movement.
Yeah, I've only done the drawing sessions like a couple of times, but from what I remember, I think the first time I ever tried it, I picked a pose and the person leading the class was like, "Are you sure you want to do that pose?" And I was like, "I'll be fine." And then after a few minutes, I was not fine.
There is nothing you can choose that is not going to hurt or or leave you sort of like limping, unable to walk by the time that you hear the alarm go off. It's
Yeah,
kind of
and it's nice to be able to have a posing flow, especially now that there's digital photography. They can snap one and then you move into the next and snap another one, and it is a lot more movement for sure.
definitely, like I still do a lot of like wet plate photography and stuff like that, where you have to hold a pose for a long time, but it's nothing like the modeling. And I love with digital photography how you can really like literally use movement. It's definitely one of my favorite uh, ways of working. There's just a spontaneity to it that you can't get with the longer poses.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I look at your photos that you share, I definitely get this strong vibe that you curate the photographers that you'll work with to be like primarily fine art style photographers. And I think that like that really lends itself to like your style and your essence as a model.
Yeah, I feel like I've definitely pigeonholed myself over the years, which has been kind of nice. I feel like when I first began, I tried a bit of everything, as I think most people do. I sort of reasoned that there was logic in sort of having a really diverse portfolio, and therefore I would appeal to a really diverse range of photographers. But over the years, I've just learned what I like and what I'm good at. And I think luckily in my case, that's the same thing. I don't think that's always true, but it certainly makes it easier to do a good job when it's something that you're really passionate about. And to me, that is mostly the fine art nudes in nature. I love work that sort of really showcases the connection between humans and nature, because we are a part of nature, and I think we forget that a lot of the time. So I love that, but I just also love portraits. I think there's a portrait element and a lot of the work that I love most, and that can still be like a full length nude, but I like there to be sort of an emotional or narrative quality to that, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah. So since you do a lot of outdoor modeling, what do you do in the winter time when it's too cold?
I go to the warmer states for sure, and I used to try to go home once a year to like New Zealand and Australia and tour there a bunch. I must say I haven't been doing it as much recently. I think it just got really complicated during the pandemic, and then I've just sort of fallen out of the habit of it. But yeah, I definitely slow down a little bit in the winter, which is nice, but I do still, you know, travel at least once a month, usually to, you know, Arizona or Texas or Utah or somewhere that you can sort of get away with being, well, actually, no, Utah gets really cold during the winter, doesn't it?
It
Anyhow,
can.
yeah, I think I've mostly been there in the spring and the fall. But yeah, I stay busy. I've been doing remote shoots too since the pandemic, which has been a nice option to have in downtime. Not that I feel like I have a lot of downtime.
I know exactly how you feel about that. It's like I don't have a job. How am I so busy?
Right? I know. I think it's the curse or there's a blessing and a curse of freelancing. I think it's so great if it's a lifestyle that works for you. And I think that anybody who's stuck with this for a reasonable amount of time is doing it because they're passionate about it. Like it would just be miserable if you weren't, because there's
Yeah.
so many unpaid hours, and but it's a lifestyle. And I think, yeah, the downside is there's always something you could be doing to to better yourself or to better your career. There's always, in my case, like I'm never completely caught up on my emails, which has been a
Yeah.
big stress factor in my life in recent years and something I'm trying to work through. But yeah, there's just always something you could be doing. It's really hard for me to switch off and just take a walk or take a bath or something, knowing that I owe people messages. And they're like people I know too, you know, because most people I work with, I'm planning to work with, I have worked with multiple times. So they feel like friends. And I just hate that I feel like I'm constantly much slower than I would like to be.
Yeah. I guess in a way though, it's good to be busy because that means like, even if it's just casual conversations that you need to respond to, I'm sure some of them are work emails that it all means that people want to work with you. So that's good.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. No, I have no complaints there. I feel very, very blessed to feel so supported and part of this community. I'm so grateful. And this is, yeah, living in the States right now, I think is a really great place for me to be in that respect. I just couldn't have the same level of busyness back home, I don't think.
Yeah. And I feel like living in the city alone makes one busier somehow.
I think so too. I feel like I've almost kept myself at a length from the city that I'm currently living in for that reason, because I just feel so filled up by everything that's going on with the work trips and stuff. And, you know, the last city I lived in, I was really a strong part of a social scene there. And it was just like, that was always a lot in and of itself. Whereas now I feel like I almost have created like this sanctuary for myself so that I can just curl up in a ball when I'm home from trips and concentrate on refueling and healing my body and catching up on the admin side of things, which, as you know, is ever present.
That resonates a lot with me because, like, currently I'm staying in a city and I can't wait to get back to the middle of nowhere. But my boyfriend is very social and he wants to
Mm-hmm.
set up all these social activities for us that I do want to do, but the schedule of all of them the day after the next stresses me out. And I'm like, oh, I have to write my newsletter and post to Instagram and edit these photos.
Oh my gosh, yes, I can definitely relate to that. Although my husband is an introvert as well, it's always kind of great actually. We just can sit at home and stare lovingly into each other's eyes when I'm here,
It's
and
not.
then I go away, and it's just like nonstop from the second I leave home till the second I get back. I think that kind of I think that's hard to relate to for a lot of people who aren't in this specific career of
Yeah.
travel.
So when you go on your tours, how long are your tours right now?
Right now, I've sort of found myself in a pattern of like 2 to 2.5 weeks, and that's shorter than it has ever been historically. I, and I feel like there's been, I mean, I've definitely experimented with different things over the years, and I think that's the sort of variety of, you know, places I've been in and lengths of trips and stuff has helped to keep things feeling fresh to me. But I feel like there has been a general trend of them getting shorter. Like I've, you know, a lot of familial responsibilities at home now. So I've got to carve out a lot of time for that. And I don't know. It just feels like a good length, I think, 2.5 weeks, 2 to 2.5 weeks. I feel like I'm giving my best that entire time. And I feel like I've always booked intensely, but when I was booking for longer, like 4, 6 weeks, that kind of thing, I think I definitely had a little bit of downtime in those trips, and now I certainly do not at all day, every day for that time. I might have like 1 or 2 half days possibly free, but sometimes not even that.
Wow, that does sound pretty intense, actually. I mean, how many cities are you going to in the 2.5 weeks?
I would say usually 3 or 4.
I
Yeah. How does that fit against what you're doing at the moment?
So, I mean, maybe my experience is different because when I started modeling, I was basically gone for 2 weeks and then I'd be home for 2 weeks. So, two
Mhm.
weeks between 2 to 3 cities has been like the most intense that I've toured. But most of the bookings that I had at the time, that was like between 2012 to 2017, I was doing that. It was mostly like 2 to 4 hour shoots, and a lot of them were like glamour GWCs in a hotel or a basement. And I burned out of that really hard at the end. And that's when I sort of wanted to morph more into the like fine art like genre, because I find that a lot of the fine art photographers want to book, I mean, not always, but often they want to book longer shoots. And it seems like less of a hustle to shoot a bunch of different striptease outfit type things.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, the what I'm doing now, it feels more fulfilling and I try to space it out more.
I can definitely relate to what you're saying. I feel like when I'm in New York specifically, where I just visited actually for the first time in quite a few years. And part of the reason for that is it always felt like such a grind. And although it's like I'm still working in the fine art genre there, because it's New York and it's not a ton of nature and everybody's in like tiny spaces, I feel like all of the bookings are always really short and everything is like set, just feels like a grind to get from one place to the other. So it's just sort of like putting together a bunch of 2 hour shoots in wildly different places from one another. It does feel like a lot more work.
Yeah, and then you have to carry everything up and down the stairs to get to and
So
from the
many stairs.
subway.
I'm never not on the fifth floor in every single building I'm going to in New York. I feel like this is like a hard and fast rule.
Yeah.
And why do I bring so much stuff? I'm a nude model.
Yeah. Same, same. I'm gonna be heading out on a trip today after this podcast, and I'm like,
Oh,
oh, I
mm.
have like 50 outfits, but like I'm only gonna use three of them.
But you don't know which three they're going to be. So
Yeah.
totally, totally essential.
Yeah. And now with at least with the way that my social media is treating me, I can't get away with posting something if I'm not wearing something.
Yeah.
Have to bring options if people are like, "Oh, I wanna be able to do a collaborator post."
And it's such a shame because you do the most impressive, just your stuff out in nature that I see you posting. It's often your self portraits. They're just so incredible. I hate that
Thanks.
there's not a lot more places that are open to sharing them, but those are the rules we are playing by, I suppose. Is I'm not a great social media person, so I just choose to not post.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It brings, like, another full-time job on top of your full-time job.
I came to the realization a few years ago that I think I could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of people enjoy that side of it. And I'm like, I just don't. It does feel like a job to me. And I could be wrong, but I think for a lot of people, they enjoy that aspect of sharing and that's awesome. And I don't know why I don't. Maybe it's just the introvertedness, but I really love the creative process. I love creating. I love like meeting with somebody who I know or somebody who I don't know and just going into this new situation and creating something that didn't exist. Like to me, that's just so magical. But then I have like a zero part of me that feels an urge to share that with the world. I don't know. I don't know what
Yeah,
that
that's
is.
interesting. I think that for me, when I'm posting, I do, because Instagram will drive photographers to say that they want to shoot with me in the comments of a photo. I think that
Mm.
makes me want to post more. I definitely get a dopamine hit of some kind when I book a shoot. And I
Yes.
know
You.
that's become a problem for me over time because in the past, I would just book a ton of shoots for my tours. And then sometimes, if I didn't do my research on the person in advance, I would get myself to the shoot thinking, oh, I was so excited when I solidified the details for this. But sometimes I get there and it's like not what I thought it was going to be.
Oh no. I mean, I think we all end up in those situations. Like sometimes you know, and I'm fairly particular about who I work with in terms of the style, just because I don't know, I feel like if I'm not really connecting with the style that's shown in their portfolio, they would be better served by finding someone who is really excited about it, who's going to be able to put their heart into it. But sometimes I get there and they just have this like totally wild card thing that they want to try that is not at all what sort of their portfolio demonstrated. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're doing this now.
Yeah, you never know sometimes.
You never know. And then there's always the like, oh, I've never seen this in your portfolio, so it must mean that you've wanted to try. It's like,
Oh
really
man,
not really.
yeah. Yeah. Speaking of like funky, crazy, weird photo shoots, I have this question that I ask everybody. I call this segment the photo shoot fail of the week. It's an opportunity for you to tell a crazy story of something that happened at a photo shoot. It could be something that happened surrounding the shoot was crazy. Maybe the photographer said or did something crazy. Or what's one of your crazy photo shoot stories?
I, I I honestly can't think of any that are crazy in like a bad way. I mean, I've had like key bad things, you know, like photographer grabbing my leg to move it for me, like I can't, or like in one case actually like hurting me, trying to pull my leg in a direction it doesn't physically go, that kind of thing. But okay, there's one coming to me now that's like a little quirky. I definitely remember being put in a tutu once while being asked to hold like a clothesline that had a bunch of paper fish pegged to it.
What?
That's kind of interesting. This was a long time ago, but I don't know. I feel like most of my crazy photo shoots have been crazy in like a cool way, like really conceptual underwater stuff where I was body painted, like holding a shield and sword. That was a
Cool.
really cool one. Or like just really interesting locations that photographers have had access to that you just wouldn't know were there. Like there was one photographer who photographed me in these catacombs under Melbourne City, which I had no idea even existed.
Wow.
But yeah, he was doing this shoot where I was meant to be like an apparition, kind of in this like weird dark setting, and that was the location. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But oh, there's one shoot that I always remember. It's not too crazy, but it was just really thought provoking to me. It it was in Australia again, and it was myself and like a headdress designer and a makeup artist and a photographer, and we ended up like out in the middle of nowhere on this waterfall, like on the top of. I was sitting on the top of a waterfall, wearing this crazy like headdress with these antlers, and I was holding this like really, really, really long piece of fabric that was like going down the length of the waterfall. And we were there at like 5, 6 a.m. or something insane. And I just thought, I just remember thinking at the time how amazing it was that we all, and this was like just a collaborative shoot for all of our portfolios at the time. And I just was like, this is so amazing that we're all willing to go to these sort of lengths to just create this thing. And I just really feel like photography is it like an excuse to explore the world in a different way. Like you
Yeah.
would be on top of a waterfall at 6 a.m., you know, just because you wanted to be on your own steam. But realistically, you know, you're probably going to be asleep. So I don't know. I just think it gives us a reason to get out and engage with the world in this incredible way. And I don't even remember seeing the photos from the shoot, but it didn't even feel that important. Like, you know, it was about this experience. I just think that's really cool. So that's one shoot that always stands out in my mind as being, yeah, I don't know about crazy, but I just like that memory. And I just like thinking of our innate creativity and just feeling so blessed that I'm in this realm where we get to explore the world in such ways.
That's true. You're totally right about that. And there's a lot of stuff that I never would have initiated or thought about going to explore, but a photographer, said, "Hey, I know this cool place," that you
Mm-hmm.
probably never would have heard of or been to if it wasn't for them having the idea to go do a shoot there, like historical places or unique nature places and stuff like that.
Exactly. And I get asked all the time whether I do like sightseeing when I travel. And
Yeah.
I don't because I just don't have time to, like, I don't at this point in my life carve out time to do those things. Hopefully, I might travel in a more balanced way in the future. But I don't really feel like I'm missing out just because of that. You know,
Right.
photographers are locals to the area and they know these beautiful natural locations or really interesting, yeah, buildings around and stuff. So you get to see a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and that in itself is its own sightseeing, but, I mean, honestly, for me, like, going to see Mount Rushmore or the Statue of Liberty doesn't really excite me as much as, like, a really cool cliff edge.
Me too. I'm very crowd phobic, so I feel like most of the typical things that people want to go and sightsee don't appeal to me that much. I would love to see more like art galleries. It would be one thing that I would love to make a habit of doing at some point. But anyway, I feel like my shoot story wasn't very crazy. Do you have a crazy shoot story?
Got lots of crazy cute stories. I mean, like, pick a topic.
Mhm.
I think that there's one experience that's popping into my mind. I don't know if I would say that the experience was that crazy or not, but it was like a shibari shoot where the photographer wasn't the person who came up with the ideas. It was like the photographer's friend, and they were like in the scene together in Seattle, so they knew each other personally outside of photography. And this guy had a bunch of different ideas that were like me being tied up in different places around the house, which it wasn't really like extreme rope, and I wasn't even like nude in the photos. I was like in some latex bikini. And at the end of the shoot, the guy said that his wife and him were both like in the scene together and they were madly in love, and she had just died of cancer like 6 months before this shoot, and he was writing a book about how they met each other and how this form of like intimacy was a major part of their relationship, and he wanted to take pictures to be an inspiration for some of the stuff he was writing in the book. And so to me, that was something that I always remembered because I was like, wow, like I just thought this was just some rope shoot, just like all the other
Yeah.
shoots. But it had such more depth to it after that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's. How did you feel about that?
I felt really good about it. He seemed to be really happy with the photos. I kind of was stunned in the moment when he told me that his wife had just died of cancer because
Mhm.
I was probably like 20 at the time, and this guy was probably 35 or 40 at the most. So his
Oh my
wife must have
gosh.
been pretty young. So it was kind of
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah, that's horrible. Oh,
Yeah.
well, it's kind of beautiful that you were able to help him do something that was obviously really meaningful for him, you know.
I think that there's been a lot of times where it's like the situation surrounding the shoot, like something that is happening in the photographer's life, makes the photos more impactful. Like when you see a photo of like a girl standing on a cliff edge, it's like one thing, but maybe that photographer was paralyzed and they just finally had a surgery where they could walk again. It's their first time being able to shoot after their surgery or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or in like, I feel like a lot of people that we work with are able to finally explore the creative side after retiring, as a less extreme example of that. But I feel like it's, I don't know, just going back to this creativity as a way of exploring the world. And I think a lot of people end up in careers that may not be as gratifying in some ways as what we're doing right now. And then they finally have like the freedom to do things that they've always wanted to do, which is really nice.
Yeah, and definitely being an outdoor nature on location model lends itself to having more of these unique experiences. And not that you can't, like, inside a house or in a studio or whatever, but I just feel like it is more of an adventure when you're doing something outside.
I think so. Yeah, you're exploring the terrain more. I feel like if I'm in a domestic space, then I'm more exploring myself. I'm just sort of going inward and trying to sort of feel a range of emotions as they come up.
Yeah.
And I find beauty in that as well. It's almost an excuse to practice sort of a meditation almost. Is that I don't know if that's the right word, but like, yeah, being present.
Yeah, and going through the flow. And
Mhm.
also, you generally have more of a conversation with the photographer when you're I feel like when you're inside, you have more time to do what you're doing because you don't have to hike or deal with the elements or potential passerbys. So there's more. I guess it depends on how much stuff they have to set up at the studio, but it seems like more of an opportunity to like chit chat in between sets.
Yes, and I don't know about you, but this is definitely one of my favorite parts of this job is like art is such a meaningful way to connect with another person. And I love that there's no one kind of photographer. Like they're coming from all walks of life, like, police officers, lawyers, like pastors, people who stack supermarket shelves, like everywhere in between. Like
Yeah.
there's no one kind of person who has an interest in this, and like getting to know people and not only getting to know them a little bit, but getting to connect with them through this thing that we both have in common that's meaningful to both of us, I just think is really beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. And there's not very many other jobs where you get to connect with that like variety of different types of people.
I agree. And I was like listening to something recently about that was talking about how in modern culture we're often isolated from people outside of our peer group often, like where there's not as much sharing of knowledge between generations as there used to be when we were living sort of in deeper community. And I was thinking, man, I don't, I feel really lucky that we do have access to, such a wide range of, not only walks of life, but ages, because I think there's some truth in that. And I have certainly had photographers outright say this before as well, that they, in their workplaces, they might be surrounded by people who are, in their age group and perhaps from similar walks of life. So this is an opportunity for them to connect with the younger generation. You don't know if they never had children themselves or whatever their circumstances. So it's cool to be able to offer that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting way to think of it as well. Have you ever had to have a job where you had set hours like in the past?
Oh yes, yep. I've done a lot of different kinds of jobs. So I would say that they all had set hours prior to this, although not necessarily conventional hours. I did a lot of work in hospitality when I was really young. Then I did a lot of laboring jobs, like working in, plantations, orchards, factories, that kind of thing. Sometimes they were quite late shifts, as was hospitality at times. Then I worked for environmental groups doing fundraising for a long time. And that was actually a traveling profession as well. I was traveling to remote communities in Australia and just, yeah, talking to people about the courses that I was working for, which was very cool. And yeah, it was pretty well after that that I started the life modeling, and then this is by far the longest I've ever been doing one job, I have to say. And I think it's the variety in this that keeps that possible. Because I think I don't know, I'm just someone who's really hungry for different experiences and I like to learn different things. So yeah, the fact that this has kept me really engaged for, well, yeah, like 15 years or so now is pretty.
Wow. Yeah, same. Are you ever worried that sometime in the future you'll have to like phase out of freelancing and end up back in some kind of an hourly job?
It's so hard to imagine at this point. It really is. I'm sure you're in the same boat. I think it's probably one of the reasons that we see so many models like attempting to retire for such a long time.
Yeah.
It's really hard to imagine putting your all of your energy into somebody else's project. But
Yeah.
sometimes I crave it too. Like I really look back on my like hospitality days or towards other jobs. Like my mum, she's changed job recently, but you know, she worked for most of the last couple of decades as a receptionist. And I just always feel like when you go to one place and work there every day, it just feels like it must become a home away from home. And I don't know, I imagine it would be, well, when I was working in cafes and stuff, they become like your family a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you're not meant to, there's a lot of like this, we're a family workplace toxicity, but I don't know. I think amongst some staff, it does kind of feel like that a bit. And this can be a lot more isolated in some ways. But to your point, I can't imagine it. But yes, I do worry a little bit about it. I feel like about a year ago, I reached this point of freaking out about what I was going to do next. And I don't know, I was just really grappling with it and feeling like I should make some moves towards it. And I started doing some like life coaching sessions, trying to work through it. And that was really helpful. But in the end, I just ended up putting it down. I was like, maybe this isn't the right time to be thinking about this. And I'm forcing it. And that's why it feels kind of off. Because I feel like in the past, I've just followed my heart and ended up in the right place.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you said that. I've actually kind of dealt with similar things. Like I hired a life coach. I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to figure out what I'm doing next because I'm going to get too old. Like I'm turning 37 next week. So I'm like, people still seem to want to shoot with me though. So at the same point, it's like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. If people still are emailing you to hire you, then you still have good work. And I'm like, I guess like my ability to be like confident in myself is my thing that I need to keep up. So whatever I got to do to like enjoy being photographed without getting self-conscious is my responsibility for myself, I guess.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Well, happy birthday for next week. I just turned 39 last week.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you. And for me, I have to say, the age thing is like a bit of a factor, but it's more with respect to the fact that I really want to have a family. And, being 39, probably should be thinking about that, but also just like in a practical sense, like what am I going to do if I'm stationary? I know some models travel with children, but I cannot imagine it for myself. So that's where I start thinking like, what can I do that would enable me to stay still?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, if you do the remote shoots and then do photography, that's an option.
Yes, I more imagine myself going in a completely different direction. But I don't know. I do think of photography sometimes, but I also see how hard it is for people to make a living doing it because I work with such talented photographers, and I think the ones who are doing weddings are doing okay, but everybody else, it doesn't seem that easy. Well, not that I need something to be easy, but it seems like kind of dwindling, I suppose. Like everybody knows somebody with a good camera now, and I think photography has always been an undervalued art form compared to most other things, and I think it's becoming even more and more that way. Like everybody's becoming more decent photographer than the pianist because of social media and stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's very competitive compared to being a freelance model, where like being a freelance model, like doing kind of what you and I are doing, is super niche.
I think it is. Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you and I started, right? Becoming maybe a little more open now, but
yeah. I want to take a short little break to tell you about Model Society. ModelSociety.com is a website dedicated to featuring figurative fine art photography for models and photographers. What makes them different than other portfolio hosting websites is that some of those other websites will still host kind of tacky photography or exploitative photos. Model Society screens all of their contributors for quality and authenticity. So you only get the best of the best on there. If you're not a photographer or model, you can still enjoy and appreciate Model Society because they also have newsletters and magazines featuring their best work and new articles each week. Check it out, modelsociety.com. I will also include a link to Model Society in the show notes. All right, now back to our show. I have another question that I ask everybody on the show that I call the rising phoenix era of your life.
Ooh.
Can you describe a situation where you were faced with some kind of a challenge that you had to overcome? And it could be related to your modeling or not.
Hmm. I feel like recently I have something that's sort of like followed me for the last 10 years since I've moved to the States has been this homesickness.
Mhm.
And this has been a real challenge for me because I feel like I'm so blessed here, and it's been really hard for me to sit in the present moment while part of me has felt like it's someplace else. For example, I've lived in this house with my husband for like 7 years and we've barely moved in. And I think, we've both had really like nomadic pasts. So that's part of it is we're not used to like settling down. But I think part of it is that it also doesn't necessarily feel permanent because I know that I want to end up back in New Zealand eventually. He's open to that and everything,
Mm.
but neither here nor there. Yeah, it's you can put things off and then realize like, wow, an eighth, the 10th or whatever of my life has just passed and I've not been fully engaged with it. And I'm not even sure what to attribute this to, but that sort of fog has lifted from me in like the last year. And I'm so freaking grateful for that because I just feel like I'm here now. And it's
Nice.
just the best feeling. So I feel like I'm able to move more fully into myself and just to appreciate just everything that I have here. And so, yeah, that's the most recent rising phoenix situation I've been up against. But certainly throughout my life, there have been so many iterations of myself, and they've been so dramatic that I feel like I've lived like multiple lives that feel like they have very little in common with one another. But yeah,
Interesting.
yes, sort of like shedding that part of my personality wanting to be somewhere else is what I'm going to go with for right now.
Homesickness, that's also something that I can relate to
Mhm.
because we travel so much. Sometimes I fall in love with a city or with an area and I'm like, "Oh, this has gotta be my next home." But,
Mhm.
like, a sense of home is, priceless. It's something that not everybody has, even if they've stayed in the same town for a very long time, but feeling at home, I think that a lot of models on the podcast have expressed this, they've been wandering for so long, they don't have roots anywhere, and that you want to go somewhere else at some point, like,
Yeah.
it's New Zealand.
Mhm. Yeah, and I feel like it's sort of like a I don't know, it's probably more prevalent in modern society than it's ever been because I don't know about you, but I've got like my family one place, my husband is here in Ohio, like my friends are all in other places all in the world, like my work is everywhere. It's sort of like everything feels so divided and complicated. And, I really look with or somebody like my mother-in-law, for example, who's just lived here her entire life. She's barely ever been outside of the state. She has like all of her family here, like all of her siblings, all of her friends that she's had since she was a child. And I'm like, this is so undisputably her home. And what must that feel like? I don't know. And I don't know. I read something recently that was something to the effect of what a blessing it is to have many homes rather than one. And I'm really trying to lean into that feeling.
But Ohio is not feeling like it right now. Is that right?
Well, it wasn't, but now I'm like, no, this is cool. Like this is where it's at for the moment. And It definitely did for most of the last 10 years feel like, well, this isn't it. Like, what am I doing? Well, I knew what I was doing. This was the right place to be for quite a few logistical reasons, but I was struggling with it. And now, I don't know, hopefully this is a sustained feeling, but yeah, I just have been feeling totally cool with it for now, which is great. I
That's
think
good.
that
That's good.
definitely the fact that I'm traveling all the time and getting exposed to, yeah, I think the lack of obvious nature and ocean and stuff here was a big part of the feeling that I was experiencing. But that's always something, I've been satiated with that when I'm traveling. But I definitely feel like engaging with the nature that is here, like just finding a nature trail and walking in it, like every week throughout the year and just seeing the way that the plants and environment changes is actually part of what has helped me feel more seated here, even if it's not, a mountain or the ocean or lake or anything grand like that. It's, Columbus, it's really it's a city. It's a city. It's, yeah, I definitely feel like it's been a factor in my feeling more at peace being here right now.
That's good. It's good to find, joy in your local nature areas. Right now, I'm in Seattle, which is my original home, and
Yeah.
I'm just visiting though. And I was walking around today, and it smells like the ocean, and the sun is warm, but there's a cool breeze. And
Mhm.
later this year, we're going to be relocating to Phoenix.
Oh my goodness. I love being, I love Seattle.
Phoenix is closer to a lot of the cool Southwest locations that I really enjoy being at, but I'll be landlocked. Like there's not going to be the
Yeah.
ocean or any big lakes nearby unless I go to Lake Powell, which is, I don't know if people really swim that much in Lake Powell.
I am not sure either. Yeah. Yeah, I love Phoenix. I could imagine like living there for a short, like a few months or a year or something like that. But it's so wildly different from New Zealand, for example, which is like, I think New Zealand's a lot more like Seattle. Actually, I love the Pacific Northwest. It's probably my favorite part of the country, but I feel like I'm cheating because it probably is just that way because it reminds me of home the most, like overcast, rainy. Like I'm all for it.
Is New Zealand or where you're from in New Zealand often overcast and raining?
New Zealand is typically overcast and rainy in general. Yeah. The native name for the country, Aotearoa, actually means land of the long white cloud, which is because when you look at it from the ocean, as they would have from their canoes or waka, they were seeing like a cloud over it all the time. I expect it's because of the mountain range, that
Oh,
ridge of mountains that runs through down most of the country where it was pushed up from the ocean. I hope I'm getting it. I think it's sort of like two tectonic plates that have pushed up this mountain ridge, which gathers clouds. And
yeah.
yeah, like Seattle, it tends to be cold, not because we get a lot of snow on the ground, but because the snow is on the mountains and it gets blowing, the cold air from the mountains blows on most of the country. It's fairly long, so we do have quite a variety for a relatively small country. Like at the top of it, it is warmer, but not the place where I'm from.
That sounds beautiful though.
Have you been there?
I have been to New Zealand once. I I did like just like an excursion. Like my at the time boyfriend and I had traveled through, and we went to Hobbit Town, and we went to Mount Doom, which is actually called the Tongariro Crossing. That was pretty epic. Yeah, so we were like on the northern part of New Zealand and the northern coast and stuff.
Nice. Yeah. I think a lot of the like natural draws are there. Well, I feel like everywhere. A lot of people go like right down south to Queenstown and Wanaka where they have like a lot of the skiing and stuff like that. But yeah, I think if I had to choose one island to recommend to somebody, I think the North Island has a lot of cool, like really cool geothermal stuff and really big trees. And I don't know. Yeah.
It was beautiful. It was
I'm
super. The hike that we did was the hardest hike I've ever done in my life.
excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
It's some steep inclines.
yeah. Have you ever hiked the Tongariro Crossing?
I have not. I regret to say that I've not done any like any of the serious hikes in New Zealand. Probably because like when we were traveling as a family, I I don't know, I would have been way too annoying to do like a really long hike. I was such a homebody child, so I just remember my entire childhood being dragged to all these like beautiful places and just complaining and whinging the whole time because I just wanted to be like cozied up at home. So
Yeah,
yeah, we did like
as
a lot of
kids
walking,
often
but none. Uh-huh, right. Which now I've made my like entire lifestyle all about traveling around and going on walks in nature, which is kind of funny how it comes full circle. But
yeah.
so a lot of day hikes or half day hikes, but none of the serious overnight ones. But I would love to do that.
Yeah, it wasn't I don't think that you would wanna do that one overnight. They basically, you have to get dropped off, like, you park somewhere and a bus, like, goes to the other side of the mountain. You don't go up and back, you go across it, and you have to get to the end
Yep.
of the
Okay.
hike by a certain time because the bus only picks
Okay.
you up until time, yeah.
Yeah. That's a good incentive to keep going.
Yeah, it was about I think they measured it in kilometers, obviously, but I think I calculated it was between thir 13 and 14 miles.
Oh, that's pretty substantial.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was intense. It was beautiful,
Now,
though, it was worth it.
see if I can rope one of my parents into to going on a hike with me.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So where are you traveling to in the near future? Maybe photographers that hear this episode can be like, "Oh, Anoush is coming."
Well, I'll actually be going to Seattle on my next trip.
Oh, no way,
I'm
when?
excited to hear that you're there. I'm going to be starting in Northern California at the last half of August, and then I'm going to be in Portland. Oh no, sorry, middle of August, NorCal. Then heading to Portland, and then Seattle is from like the 30th of August through to the 4th or 3rd,
I mean,
3rd of September.
it'll be
Yes.
beautiful.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I don't get to the Pacific Northwest as often as other places, but I really like it there.
It is the place to be in the summertime for sure.
Yes, and you can get heat waves there, right? But not as much as us.
Yeah, it gets so hot rarely, like, it'll very rarely get over 100 degrees, but because it doesn't get hot so often, a lot of people here don't have air conditioning, and people
Yeah.
die, like, especially elderly folks may pass away if they don't have air conditioning, and there's just not enough services in the area to help everybody out, so it can get kinda bad up here.
Yeah, that's a really scary symptom of like climate breakdown because I know it's the same in New Zealand. It's just, yeah, it's not typically hot. A lot of people don't have air conditioning. And as things change, well, I feel like we're really under equipped. I mean, you see in Texas with all of the flooding, it's like I guess historically have not had that much water. So they don't have the infrastructure to let it go away. The times are changing.
Yes, they are. And here on the whole West Coast, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm anticipating it will happen. We've been having smoke season for the last 5 or 6 years, where prior to that, we did not have smoke season.
Yes, that I have seen like people sharing pictures. Yeah, I feel like we've been like, knock on wood, lucky this year with, well, at least in this part of the country, we haven't had, because I feel like the last 2 summers were crazy smoke around June, July from coming down from Canada and elsewhere. But yes, I do have, I know it's common enough now that when I do plan trips to California or to the Pacific Northwest, in the back of my head, I'm like thinking, is it, are they going to have a crazy wildfire outbreak that's going to interfere with bookings, like, or just comfort of being there? Yeah.
I did
It's
have
wild.
to cancel a road trip through Northern California once in, I believe it was 2020, because of there's a massive forest fire that was blocking my entry into Northern California. So it might be that season when you get there. We'll cross our fingers that there's not a bunch of forest fires.
Oh, I hope so too. Oh my gosh. At that event that I met you at Madonna Inn, driving back to Los Angeles from that was the most intense wildfire that situation I've ever
Oh,
driven
yeah, that
through. Can't
there
remember
was
what year that
a lot.
was. There was, and I think we were lucky to have been able to get through the road, but it was, driving down that freeway along the coastline and like literally burning palm trees on the side of the road and like crazy apocalyptic looking. It was, yeah, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, it can happen. I on your Instagram page, you do describe yourself as an environmentalist, and I just want to say I really think that that's amazing, and more people should definitely be wary of nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that I've done a lot of work in the past, and it's definitely where I see my future. I feel like I'm at the point in my life where I'm just having to try to lay a foundation for, myself and my family for the future. And I think protecting the environment isn't something that's going to help me make money, unfortunately. But yeah, ultimately, I would really love to work in revegetating forests or waterways. I can't think of anything that would be more satisfying than sort of, you know, seeing dormant farmland come back to life and become habitat for nature. That's really what I want to move into someday. So that's my long term.
Yeah, that's something that would really contribute to the world. And I guess that's something that I kind of debate with myself is what I'm doing really contributing to the world, like beyond just like giving people images that they enjoy that make the world a better place, but doing something that is truly meaningful, such as environmental work, would feel fulfilling in a different kind of way.
I think you'd be surprised by how many lives you touch doing this, whether that's through meeting people in person and being able to, like, you know, share your light with them. But also, I'm surprised sometimes at the just lovely comments that people might send me about how an image really touches them or speaks to them. And imposter syndrome is real. So I guess I don't like look at what I'm doing right now as being particularly valuable either. And then I get like messages like that and I'm like, oh my gosh, because you know what it feels like when a song really just speaks to you at the right time of your life, or, art, it really can move you. And it's so hard to, I think, see what I am doing in even the same sphere as like a really amazing song or something like that. And then occasionally I get a message that, you know, that somebody just seems to be losing their mind about something. And I think, wow, that's amazing that something is speaking to them in that way. But yes, the personal relationships too. I'm sure that you are really touching a lot of lives with
Yeah.
all of the people that you talk to, and also doing this, sharing these adventures. But we also go through so many stages in our lives too. So I know this is one phase, and who knows where either of us will end up next. But hopefully we both have a long while to like make all sorts of different kinds of impact.
That's true. A person's circle of influence, like within whatever they're doing, has an impact. And this is going to sound really odd and out of left field, but I've recently kind of gone down the rabbit hole on Jerry Springer. Apparently, he had a massive positive impact on his community, despite the fact that he's known for having the TV show with the crazy like drama that's fabricated on there. But apparently, he was really active in politics before, and a lot of the people that were involved on his show did have a positive impact on it. So it's just kind of interesting to think about how it doesn't really matter what you're doing. Like you could impact others in a positive way. Yeah.
Absolutely. And like never underestimate, I don't know, just not to sound super cheesy, but just like just being a generally good person and smiling at people when you walk in the street, or just, yeah, I don't know. I think that just going about your life in a way that is kind can be so impactful. Like it spreads out from there, and you never know whose day you might light up just by saying hello, or they might be going through something awful, and then you can help them just have like a positive change in their day, and then they go and smile at somebody else. You just never know.
Yeah, that's true. I love the cheesiness, though. I'm all about it. Like, I agree with everything that you said.
Usually the things that are cheesy and like overdone, it's because they're true, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, all for the cheese.
Uh-huh.
Well, Anoush, it's been a little over an hour, and that's usually the amount of time that I do these podcasts for. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up before we say goodbye?
No, I think we've covered everything. It's been such a delight to talk to you. I can't thank you enough for thinking of me and inviting me onto the show.
Yeah.
And for just doing this and, highlighting this really niche community. It's such a cool idea. I've always admired you, by the way, in the way that I just see you as being really inspirational in terms of, I feel like I'm always seeing you exploring new things, like
Oh, thanks.
broadening your horizons in a way that I just don't feel like I do. So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
I enjoy it. Thank you for saying that. Part of it is just dodging burnout, but another part of it is I can't just do one thing. Like, there's always a new project that pops into my mind. I'm like, "Oh, I have to do that." Even if it's half-assed, like, I have to do it.
Yeah, I have a lot of like even less than half-assed things. Nothing that sees the light of day, but no, you're amazing. Thank you so much and safe travels today and happy birthday for next week.
Yeah, thank you so much. Awesome. All right, Anush, it's been great chatting with you, and I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.